Hey guys, Dead Winger here, welcoming you to the Useful Craft series in Kerbal. We have the first craft today. It is a space shuttle reminiscent of the NASA space shuttles. Now it has a reasonably sized payload bay. It can fit maybe about 2 satellites or one small lander or something along those lines. But what it does have is a lot of Delta V, so it can do all sorts of missions, both within the Kerbal system and possibly even without. Now today we'll be deploying just a very simple science satellite into low Kerbal orbit just to sort of show off its basic capabilities. Now these craft files I will of course make downloadable, so please look for a link in the description. Now the craft is comprised of a main tank and a main engine with 2 solid rocket boosters to get it off the ground. You also have two small liquid engines on the main tank just to sort of balance out the center of thrust. And also you have a Rapier engine on the shuttle itself that can be easily used when you're coming in for landings, flying the atmospheres, as you will see later. Now, when you're in orbit, it has 2 engines, well, let's say 2 engine systems. It has Werner engines for sort of in keeping with the space shuttle missions that you can use the RCS fuel for sort of maneuvering in orbit. But you can also, of course, switch the Rapier engine to a closed cycle and use that for maneuvering. With all that, the Delta V is quite enough to travel basically anywhere in the Kerbal system and perhaps even further if it's planned out well. You see the first stage separation there, going well. Tilting over at about 11 kilometers. And then continuing on into orbit. And now we are basically fast forwarding up to the apoapse. Now I do have MacJub installed and used on these crafts, but of course it's not necessary. It flies completely in vanilla. And basically at this point I'm only using it for orbital info and then surface info when you're coming into land. Very useful of course, but not necessary to use this the space shuttle. Now, one important thing to note as you get into orbit is that while the center of thrust moves away from the main tank, you will need to set a thrust limiter on the main engine. It's best to probably set it around 60%. That's what's worked pretty well for me. And if you have it that low, the SAS systems will be able to keep up with the center of thrust moving. Now we're just doing our apoapse burn here. I will take the periapse up to not quite a circular orbit, because I want to basically deposit the main engine into the atmosphere, so it will burn up instead of just having a lot of debris floating around the 70-kilometer orbit. Just see it going up here, and we'll be coming up to the separation. And that's looking quite good there. Separate it. And moving away from the main engine slightly and then doing our apoapse burn. Now we could, as you can see, we have a lot of fuel and we could go a lot further, but we're just going to deploy our satellite here. Go ahead and open up the main bay. And we have a pretty basic science satellite today. Has about 5,000 or 6,000 meters of delta V. Also for toggling the Rapier and the Werner engines, you can use the hotkeys 1 and 2. Carefully getting it out, making sure not to scratch the paint or break off the very fragile solar panels. Now, of course, there are lights in the bay, which I pretty much neglected to turn on, but are very good, for example, if you're doing dark side deployments. And there we go, one satellite deployed. And now with the deployment done, it's time to plan our deorbital burn going here. Sort of trying to just roughly hit the space center for a runway landing. The space shuttle is very controllable in the atmosphere, so even if you're a little bit off, it's quite okay to you can fly quite a ways in it. Just fast forwarding here to the deorbit burn. Missed it by a couple of seconds, but no biggie. We actually do end up undershooting it a little bit. And now coming back into the atmosphere. Now that is a pretty sight. And here we are coming up on the continent that has the Kerbal Space Center on it. Like I said, it's a little bit of an undershoot, but we can simply turn on the do a little bit of atmospheric flight. This thing does handle very well in the atmosphere. It can glide or fly for quite a ways. So we'll just fast forward here to the point where we are almost at KSP. Now it does have an extra SAS on the back, which you can turn off if you find it to be too finicky. It was basically placed there to make the ascent easier with the center of thrust moving around. Coming there around the mountains, just right next to KSP. Do some final maneuvers and then we're almost home. Now lining up for the landing here. And in the end, just a smooth landing on the KSP runway. Tiny bit of overshoot, but nothing to worry about. And rather smooth touchdown. Alright guys, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and please stay tuned for more entries in the Useful Craft series.